Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Truth, where today we're going to take a peek at this week's college football games, what happened, my thoughts on it, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to take a peek in the next week, my games to circle, what to watch, what could be interesting, what to watch for the playoffs now, because it's starting to get there. It's like a blink of an eye. College football just started. Dominant win by Georgia. Another one. Really impressive win for them. Georgia did have that one big play early on. I believe it was like the start of the game or something like that. Tennessee had that one big play, and then after that, Tennessee really didn't do anything. Georgia dominated for what felt like almost the entirety of the game. I believe they put their backup in the fourth quarter. I don't really remember. Like to see them play better offensively, though, even with it being a backup. Other than that, look, Georgia's just proving why they're number one. Ohio State versus Minnesota. This is a good game by Ohio State. This is more games like this they need to stay at number two. Michigan kind of played a close one. This game was a little surprising. I didn't think it was going to be this close. Maryland kind of stuck in there. They made a big third quarter push. Michigan got off to an early lead. They started trailing off, and kind of almost the polar opposite happened, except for Michigan played really good in the fourth quarter. Holy cow, let's talk about this North Alabama versus Florida State game. Florida State goes 13 up, non-touched. Then I believe his name is Jordan Travis, starting quarterback for the Florida State. Something with his ankle or his foot. Prayers up that he makes a good recovery. He's back for next season. I believe he's out for the rest of the season. He gets injured. Roadmaker comes in, and look, he just leads them to a victory. 24 drops 24 in the second, and the rest is history. 58-13. But I mean, it's just like, that's one thing that's being said is right now is if Florida State goes undefeated, will having their starting quarterback out change things up? I don't think so. Maybe you could make an argument that Washington should be ahead of them, but that offense was still dominant. Even though it's North Alabama, they're not good college football-wise. Look, I mean, they deserve it. Like, look, I don't see why you don't keep them at number 4. Number 5, Washington squeaks out a close one against Oregon State. Completely offensively shut out in the second half. Other than that, you'd like to see them do better, especially against Oregon State. Teams I think of, like, if they do make the playoffs, they'll probably end up playing Georgia or Ohio State / Michigan, who have good defenses. And that's going to be their big thing. If they can't score with Michael Penix, what's going to be up with that? Oregon, a dominant win against Arizona State. Man, it's going to be really interesting to see how the race ends, because it's going to be them and Washington. It's going to be really interesting to see. This game was slightly closer than I thought it'd be. The third quarter, I was like, dang, I didn't really think about it. Weird game. You just like to see better by Texas. You want to see them have those dominant wins. You're 10-1 in the Big 12. It feels lackluster, to say the least. You want to see them, like, their potential so high, but they're not living up to it. They keep playing to the level of other teams. And it's sad. You want to see better. Bama, train wrecking Chattanooga. Not surprising. Moving on. This game did shock me. Florida versus Missouri. Missouri almost got upset here. Florida played really good. Man, oh man, did Missouri's defense look very disappointing. Offensively, they did amazing. I mean, you couldn't really. You could ask for more, but I mean, like, you really shouldn't. I mean, they put up 33 points. You really feel good about the offensively. Defensively, it's kind of a shocker, like Hayes an outlier game. What really happened? Missouri's been playing really well, but other than that, hey, yeah, those wins, I guess. On to the next game. Louisville, another game where it's like you like to see them do better. Played really close, especially if they want to break into top four, which you need to make the playoffs. You got to have good wins. This one hurts, having a really close win against Miami, but you still pulling out at the end of the day. Penn State, dominant win against Rutgers. Not really anything else to say. Ole Miss, dominant win against UL Monroe. Nothing else to be said. Oklahoma versus BYU. This was super close. Super, super close. For a second there, I thought Oklahoma might lose to BYU. It was a weird game by them. It was a really weird game because offensively, they kind of felt sluggish. But at the end of the day, they still put up almost, I believe they put up almost I believe they almost put up what was it be 24 points ish, which I mean is pretty good. Like it's not bad. It's just a weird offensive game for them. Defensively, not bad. You like to see them do better against a beat team like BYU. Other than that, it's weird, very weird game. Moving on, but I'm sorry. At the end of the day, look, a win's a win. You move on, 9-2. Going to LSU, kind of what we expected. 2 touchdowns in the first half was a little surprising, but then again, I think LSU's defense really isn't that good. Offensively, Jaden Daniels dominated, went off. 8 touchdowns is insane. I mean, statistically, I can see why you have him as your Heisman winner. Maybe you don't like him over Penix. I've heard arguments, but statistically, it makes sense. I mean, guy's dominating this year. Really is dominating against. He's playing well against non-top 25 teams, top 25 teams, conference teams. I mean, look, this guy's eating, so you got to respect it. Offensively, kind of what we expect by Iowa. Iowa usually doesn't put really dominant offensive wins together, but defensively, they're pretty good. They sneak one out. If it wasn't for that safety, they'd have this game tied in overtime, but they sneak one out. Good stuff for Iowa. A win's a win. Moving on, Arizona with a dominant win against Utah. Utah's probably going to get knocked out of the top 25 again. Arizona's been that kind of quietly good. They're 6-2 in the Pac-12. I didn't realize that. That's pretty good. Good for Arizona. Going to our next game, we have Notre Dame versus Wake Forest. Notre Dame has fallen off for me since the start, since early on in the season. But dominant win against Wake Forest. You move up. You're you're not in a conference. You're independent. That's good. Bring in recruits. That's good for Notre Dame to have this good of a game with Hartman having 4 touchdowns, which Notre Dame loves throwing the football. A quarterback having 4 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. That's really good. Really good for recruiting and all that. I believe our only upset, I could be wrong about that. I believe our only upset of the week, North Carolina officially knocked out of the top of making the playoff race. It feels like if you drop to 2 losses, you probably get knocked out, but there are still multiple weeks left in college football, so it's not impossible. But I mean, if you have 3, it's basically over at this point. North Carolina drops the game to Clemson. Bad offensively. I really want to see what happened. I don't watch this game. I want to see how Drake May played. It's gonna be interesting to see how his stock moves around, especially with Jaden Daniels playing so well this year. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. It's gonna really be interesting to see how my draft board is gonna look this season. But good win by Clemson. This was kind of the game where I kind of looked at as like, hey, this is potentially a game that could happen. Disappointing game by North Carolina. They they're not as good as I thought they were. Good stuff for Clemson. Early on at Clemson, I was like, I don't know about this Clemson team. A lot better season this year. I like what they're doing. Keep on keeping on. You're still 4-4 in the ACC, but start rebuilding it. Start becoming that dominant Clemson that they used to be. A very close, almost upset by Kansas over Kansas State. Kansas State had been playing down almost all this game. In the fourth quarter, they seal it away. Good stuff to them. You like to see their defense do better. But hey, you stayed top 21. Keep moving on. Coming into our last games, we have Oklahoma State over Houston. Like I said before, you like to see them defensively do better, but offensively, still great. Gordon, he's a big running back. I know a lot of people are liking him from Oklahoma State. 3 touchdowns on the ground. Pretty impressive. My thing with Oklahoma State is offensively, they're doing well. They just really need to hit the transfer portal and get good recruits defensively to keep growing. Tulane over Florida Atlantic, not surprising. Tulane, great game. They're 10-1. I don't see why you can't have them in the race for top team who can make playoffs. It's possible. Don't count them out just yet. There's still some wins. So keep them in mind. 3 touchdowns through the air. It's pretty good. Moving on to next week, we have Mississippi State versus Ole Miss. Could be interesting. It's an SEC game. It's 6:30 on a Thursday. I wouldn't really put your money on it, but if you have nothing else better to do on Thursday, you don't like Thursday Night Football with whatever game showing, tune into this. Could be interesting. Could be fun. Could also not be. It's one of those SEC games that can be a little weird. TCU versus Oklahoma. Normally I'd say a 9-2 team against a 5-6 team shouldn't be close. Oklahoma, like Texas, are now playing down to their opponents. Don't like what they're doing. I like to see them do better. Now this is kind of a disappointing Oklahoma. This could be a disappointing Oklahoma game. They probably do win this one. Nebraska versus Iowa. I'd probably keep an eye out for this one. This one could also be pretty close. There are a couple close games this week. Nebraska isn't a good team, but Iowa offensively, they struggle. The line's even, which, makes sense. So just keep an eye out for this because this could be a game where, Iowa could get upset. UTSA versus Tulane. This could be another potential upset game. Keep an eye out for it. Tulane hasn't been dominant, but so isn't UTSA. It's going to be interesting to watch. I tune in this game because if Tulane loses this game, they probably definitely won't make the playoffs. Almost guaranteed if I look back up because you have 2 more weeks after this. Technically, yes, you could make the playoffs, but realistically, probably not. Missouri playing Arkansas. Arkansas is one of those teams who are these are all Friday games. Sorry to let you know. So if you have nothing to do Friday, tune into these games. Missouri versus Arkansas. Arkansas has been very disappointing from what I've seen, from the hype that they've had. Missouri, it should be a good game. Probably a bounce back game. Can't wait to see what Missouri does. Texas Tech versus Texas. Look, battle for Texas. I expect this game to be like their last game, playing down to their opponents, kind of keeping it close. Another good game to watch out for. Penn State versus Michigan State. I expect that to be a sweep. One game I would tune into Friday if you are going to watch a game. 7:30 on Fox. Oregon State versus Oregon. The battle for Oregon. Bo Nix versus Oregon State. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun to watch. This is going to be the game. If Oregon gets knocked out for sure, there are 2 games. It's the championship game for the for the Pac-12, and it's this Oregon State game. These are the big games to tune into. So, that's what I would tune into. That's why I'd see is hey, this is really what's going to make it. Oregon State, if they pull off the upset against Oregon, they knock them out. I feel like that's motivation for them. The line's 14.5 for Oregon, but, it could be closer than that. Bo Nix is playing amazing. This would be great if a dominant win for a stock. There are a couple good games Saturday. There are a couple good games this week, but a couple good games Saturday. Of course, what we've all been waiting for to see who is going to take home the Big Ten for the playoff wise. It's Michigan versus Ohio State. It's really going to be interesting because Ohio State has played really, really, really tough games. They've had arguably the toughest strength of schedule team, but Michigan has a lot of dominant wins. So this is the game. It's how good is Ohio State and how good is Michigan. I've been kind of down on Ohio State. This is a game for them to where they can prove that they're better than Michigan. I will try to be watching this game on Saturday. It's at 11 on Fox. Definitely tune into that. There are a couple other games which you could watch. There's another game you could watch at 11. Kentucky versus Louisville. Could be close. It really depends on Jake Plummer, how well he's doing in that run game. Jordan for Louisville, dominant runner. If Kentucky can't stop it, I like Louisville -7. I get it. I believe this is gonna be a close game. It's gonna be a shootout. Texas A&M is 7-4. LSU's 8-3. It's in Baton Rouge. I mean, if you're Brian Kelly, you really have to win this season out. Let me finish this. If you're Brian Kelly, you have to finish out because if you lose to Texas A&M, you go from a 3-loss team last year to a 4-loss team this year. Not really good looking at it. I mean, you really become on the hot seat the year after for having such a bad defense. So each game feels like a must win at this point, and you just gotta win them out. Texas A&M, you really don't have anything to fall back on. Like, there's no risk if you're Texas A&M just because your head coach is already fired. You're literally playing to just upset teams and playing your heart out. That's really what it is. Other than that, that's a good game to watch at 11 too. I'll probably be flipping back between Ohio State, Michigan, and LSU and Texas A&M. Colorado and Utah. Colorado's fallen off. I know Shedeur statistically looks really good, but I like this Utah team. I really do. Utah's -21.5, and it makes sense. Alabama versus Auburn could be a close game. Depends on how good Auburn's run game is against this Bama defense. Bama defense is really good. It's not to be overlooked. Keep an eye out for it. Doubt's going to be a close game, but keep an eye on it. Arizona versus Arizona State. Arizona State really isn't that good this year. I kind of think this is going to be a sweep. Same thing for Vanderbilt versus Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to sweep Vanderbilt. They're not as good as they were last year, but it's Vanderbilt at the end of the day. BYU versus Oklahoma State. Kind of the same thing. BYU is kind of that more physical, tough, run the football type team. Oklahoma State has more weapons. Plus, they have Gordon, who's been playing amazing. I think for almost every 100 yards he has it paired along with the touchdown, which is insane. I mean, it's possible if he has another great game like last week, he'd have to have 600 yards about. There's 3 weeks left in college football. I mean, if he averaged 200 yards the rest of the season, if he put the team on his back, he could realistically finish the season with 2,000 rushing yards and close to 20 touchdowns, which is that the case, he's going to be the number 1 running back next year. Washington State versus Washington, I feel like Michael Penix should and will just sweep it. I mean, 17.5. I mean, not 17. 17-point favorites makes sense. Florida versus Florida State. Florida's played really interesting. They can score. They just haven't put it all together. Keep an eye out. We're really going to see how good this Florida State team is with a week away from their starting quarterback being injured. It's going to be really interesting. Keep an eye on that. Notre Dame versus Stanford. Expect Notre Dame to get a sweep. Georgia versus Georgia Tech. I expect Georgia to beat the socks off of Georgia Tech. Kansas versus Cincinnati. Same kind of thing. North Carolina versus NC State. That's a game to tune at 7 o'clock. That could be a close game. I keep an eye out on it. North Carolina isn't the best team, but this game's really gonna feels like at this point it's really kind of making or breaking Drake May. If you do look at it with wins and losses, I don't. I like to look at the entire season, each play by play. But if you are those guys who kind of pair along wins with quarterbacks, this is a big game for him. It's gonna be interesting because you don't want to lose 4 games. You kind of want to win out. I can't wait to watch the film this season on Drake May. It's gonna be really interesting. Going into Iowa State versus Kansas State. Kansas State's 11.5-point favorites. Iowa kind of hung in with Texas. Can they do the same thing with Kansas State? Kansas is a worse team than Texas, but Texas likes to play down to their opponent, so it's really going to be interesting to see. Another game you could probably flip in and flip out with North Carolina, 7 o'clock p.m. on Fox. Hey, thank you all for watching. Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. Should I drop a video on potential teams that could realistically make the playoffs or not? Or should I just keep covering it, covering different teams and stuff? I'm working on something for after week 15. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I am working on something. Other than that, we'll see what happens. Leah, let me know what you like, what you dislike. Do you think I'm wrong about my opinions from week 12? What do you think I'm right about my predictions for week 13? Or you think I'm wrong? Let me know. Conversate with me in the comments, and I will see y'all next